Hi everyone, my name is Taylor. So today I'm going to do a presentation. So over the recent years, school shooting incidences have risen substantially. Reasoning behind why rises have happened is still kind of unknown speculation. I mean, everyone has had 2 cents to put in as to why different reasons on why school shootings are happening so more frequently, but matter of the fact is there's still no one surefire reason as to why it's happening. So I am proposing to do kind of like a two-step policy change in order to make schools safe and secure. The U.S. Department of Education and ultimately Congress is who I'm advocating to and who is going to be the one ultimately to be able to make this policy change. So the first step of this two-step plan is to increase safety measures at all schools. So security guards increased, so having them placed more, with the increase, having them placed more strategically throughout the school to where they're not just, their one office is in the back of the school and that's where they're at, but having them placed at every entrance, like before school and then during lunches, stuff like that, whenever there's more busy periods. And then also having metal detectors added to schools so that being able to get inside with a weapon would be harder to do, harder to sneak one in. So there was an article from CNN that talked about how multiple schools are now calling for more security officers in order to kind of help give a sense of peace of mind to parents and students to help them feel a little bit more safe and secure while they're at school. And also in the article, it talked about placing panic buttons all around school to help if something were to happen and you can't get to your cell phone or something like that, that you can have that reach out to be able to call for help. So kind of like all the blue emergency buttons that are around USC that we have, having them placed around schools would also be beneficial. So the second step to this policy change is more so the more controversial part of it. So it would be allowing teachers or security officers or any other school official to be able to carry a weapon if they so choose. So having this trained personnel on campus that can help defend and protect the student body and the faculty, I think personally will help deter and protect students and faculty from attacks. I think if an attacker were to know that there are people on campus that are armed and are trained in order to help like counterattack on you, I feel like it would deter more so people than like if a person went to a school knowing that there was no armed anybody on campus. So a lot of schools have the signs up where it says that the school does not have a tolerance for any kind of weapon. So, I mean, a person seeing that wanting to attack a school is more likely to go to that school knowing that they're not going to have any kind of retaliation. There's an article from the Washington Post that describes that the increase in security measures in school, which in turn talk about increasing security officers and having armed police officers patrol the outsides of schools more often in like lower economy areas, kind of more high-risk schools for issues like school shootings to happen, having police officers to patrol around kind of more frequently to help deter off anybody and give a peace of mind to the student body. So there's an article I talked about in my previous podcast from BBC News from a school in Colorado. A police officer decided to hold a training course pretty much for teachers or any other school official that wanted to be able to be trained and be knowledgeable in owning and carrying a weapon, which I think if this policy change were to happen, it's definitely something that needs to be implemented, that they need to obviously be trained and be prepared in order to carry a weapon on school premises. But other than just physically handling a gun, the class that was offered also kind of gave a like mentality education as well to help mentally prepare teachers, school officials, whoever it was that was taking the class, of what could happen in the sense of a school shooting and what they need to be prepared for. An article from City Lab shows that it shows a bunch of data on each state and which state allows certain gun laws and everything. And it showed that 11 states have an outright no policy on open carry, or not open carry, but carry on on school campuses, and then 9 have an outright yes. And then all other ones really either defer to the judgment of all other states, defer to the judgment of the individual schools themselves, or a lot of them had a policy of you could have a weapon, like a legal weapon, if it was in your car locked away, but not on campus, actually, like with you in the building. So I get the point of that one, but then, I mean, if a school shooter is inside your school, I mean, what good is your gun going to do you if it's locked away in your car in the parking lot? So I realize that both of these steps include a need for increased funding, which is an issue in and of itself for education, besides just asking for funding for this increased security and all of that. So it's definitely something that the Congress and U.S. Department of Education is going to have to figure out and find the funds for. But school shootings have been happening repeatedly in increased rates, and something needs to be done. Stuff like 9/11 happened once. It only had to happen one time before government decided to make a change and make airports safer and have all of these safety measures implemented. So why shouldn't schools have the exact same effect of having it only to happen once before increased security measures were taken? So that is my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
I have 2 for you.
Okay,
so for these panic buttons, is there like any kind of way, I know for like smaller kids, they're very tempted to press things. So
yeah.
Is there any way that you would prevent these kind of false alarms from happening?
I feel like with like younger schools, so like elementary school, obviously like those are the ages that kids wouldn't really necessarily understand what they're for. Mm-hmm. I feel like the placement of them would be put in a place where like only teachers would know where they're at or like be able to use. So I don't think it's something for, at least for elementary schools, for them to teach their students like, hey, this button is over here, like in case something happens. And then, you know, young kids will be like, oh, Jimmy stole my toy, let me push the button because something happened. So I feel like it's something that would have to be kind of like teachers only kind of thing, like they know where it's at and they only have access to get to it.
And secondly, recently in Georgia, there was a teacher who brought his gun into his classroom, barricaded himself in the classroom, and then shot his gun out the window. What do you think about that in regards to arming teachers with guns?
Yeah, I heard about that. So it kind of goes back to the argument that was made about background checks. So having the mental health kind of aspect to background checks to getting guns, I am completely an advocate for. And I feel like it's the same way with these kind of classes. So arming teachers with guns is how I talked about in the article from BBC News, where they went through like an extensive, I think it was like a 3-day course where it was learning how to handle weapons, but then also having the background check, the mentality check, having ensure that people are of sound mind in order to have these kind of weapons.
So before you give teachers guns, you want to implement some kind of background check process to make sure they should have a gun before bringing it.
Yeah, definitely. So like that class that I was talking about, like that's something that if teachers, school officials, wherever, were to be given weapons, then they have to have this kind of training. You can't just willy-nilly say, oh, if you have a gun, you can bring it to class. No, it's something that kind of class that they did in Colorado needs to be your state is okay with guns on campus, then that kind of class needs to take place first.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
My comment is towards the like panic buttons. I think that's like a good idea. And I think a way that if they were to implement it, they could do it so like at elementary, so like little kids don't touch it. It's kind of like the fire alarm where you kind of have to break it to actually activate it kind of thing. So that could probably be a thing. But my question was, how do you think parents would react to having their teacher of their child have a gun in the classroom?
I personally would think that if one day when I have children and I send them off to school, knowing that school shootings is something that unfortunately regularly happens now, knowing that my child is at education center that is equipped and able to protect them if that were to happen. I personally would have some kind of peace of mind with that, knowing that my child would be protected. There's obviously definitely going to be those ones who are against it, and I completely understand that, but I think that most of the country would feel more safe and secure. Any more questions?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
I need to know if you did any research, because when I was looking at the metal detectors, which is funny, we had the same topic, they found that like all of these safety precautions were actually correlated with negative feelings of fear. And how do you think students would respond to knowing that their teacher is carrying a gun? Do you think they would act up more? Do you think they would be more scared? Like, how do you think they would feel?
I think, so I, growing up, was always that kind of person that, like, knowing if punishment was going to happen, that I wouldn't, like, I was a well-behaved child because I was scared of punishment. Not that I think that students would think that their teachers would use the guns on them. Obviously, that's kind of crazy. But I feel like students would not so much be fearful in a sense, but just kind of be knowledgeable and be aware that that's a thing and that's what's happening. I don't really know how students would really take to it. I don't think that it would cause any more problems than it would be. I mean, knowing that my teacher had a gun, I feel like I personally would feel safe, but then I would also be like, I don't really want to mess with them either. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
It does, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Okay.
With you were talking about the students and the teachers with the guns, but how would they prevent students from taking these guns from the teacher?
So, I mean, it's like with parents having guns in their household, with having children at home, trying to prevent them. It's under lock and key, so a safe in the classroom that only they could get into, or a drawer in their desk with a key lock that only they can get into, kind of security measures like that. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys.